Hello, yeah. My name is Pita Arreola, and I'm the head of programs at arebyte Digital Center in London. For those of you who are not familiar with arebyte was founded in 2013 as an art organization that is dedicated to explore how emerging technologies are shaping contemporary culture, and we do this through exhibitions, through events, and public programs. And today, arebyte is both registered as a charity, as a national portfolio organization supported by Arts Council England. And last year, arebyte opened London's first dedicated center to digital art practices, and it's now home to more than 140 artists and creatives across the 6 floors that are part of this building. And we're very excited to be hosting this conversation with Maya Mand as part of the public program for our current solo exhibition, Soft Bodies Called Machines by artist Ambie Drew, which will be on view until August 2nd at our by Digital Center in London. And this exhibition explores the experience of growing up online within a hyper-mediated environment where algorithms and AI-generated images have an impact in how humans are building identity. And the show responds to our curatorial theme, the body, the mind, and the soul, which concludes with this exhibition. And we're also very pleased to be featuring Maya Man as the inaugural artist in our media wall, responding to Ambie's exhibition and presenting her generative artwork, Fake It Till You Make It, which Maya will speak more in a second about. And the work reflects on the language and aesthetics of the girl boss internet sphere and is screened daily at arebyte at 2 and 6 p.m. on the media wall that is located by the building's main entrance and will be again on view until August 2nd. And today, Maya will be speaking about this work and other related artworks that she has created in recent years. And this presentation will be roughly around 20 minutes and will be followed by a brief conversation between Maya and myself. And towards the end of the event, we will open the discussion up to questions from the audience. So please, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat and we will discuss them at the end of the presentation and the conversation. And without further ado, I'm gonna introduce our speaker. Maya Man is an artist focused on contemporary identity culture on the internet. Her website's generative series and installations examine gender narratives around femininity, authenticity, and the performance of self online. And she has exhibited international and the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, the Beat Forums New York, Shoot Tokyo, Verse London, House of Electronic Arts in Basel, and the online platform Profile. And she was invited to speak on her work at multiple institutions and international organizations. And Maya organizes a curatorial project, called Heart, that was previously run out of her studio in Soho, New York City, where she's joining us from tonight. And yeah, and now I'm gonna open the floor to you, Maya, so you can do your presentation.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. I'm going to share my screen, and share this. Okay. You should be able to see this now. Okay. So this is my website. And a secret about most of the websites that I make is that I usually keep something hidden underneath all of my websites in the console, the JavaScript console. So if you open up the console of my website, this is kind of where you can leave notes. Developers tend to do this. And so I left a note here to a Google Doc that we're going to go to now. I left another note here for myself that says click here, but if you visit this Google Doc, you can leave me a note if you find it in the console. But today I'm just going to talk through several of my projects that kind of have evolved both pre and post Fake It Till You Make It, which is the piece that's featured on the media wall at arebyte right now. And I thought it would make sense, as I do for many of my artist talks, to take the browser for a bit of a walk. So we're going to go for a walk. And what you're seeing right now here is basically a preview of everything that I'm going to talk to you about over the next 20 minutes. But like Pita mentioned. I'm an artist. I'm based in New York. And really, most of my work revolves around this interest in thinking about how we present and perform online. And a lot of my work lives in the browser, and exists as websites or generative systems. This is a website from last year called Pure Information that uses a data set of text messages I've received with my name in them. And that unfolds through a stream on this site. And I always like to open with this because it feels very introductory. But the first project that I want to talk about, the first piece of mine is called Fake It Till You Make It, like Peter mentioned. And I'm just going to pull up here. This is the website for the project, but the piece is actually running live here. And this work is from 2022, which is already almost exactly 4 years ago. It was released last in August of 2022. And so this piece really focuses on the graphics that I think were very popular during the late 2010s, early 2020s, which incredibly already feels somewhat archival, the time of these graphics and when Instagram was square. But around that time, I became really interested in collecting instances of these graphics that I was seeing on Instagram. And so these are all actual graphics that existed on Instagram that I would save. And they usually have this very specific color palette, this typeface, and they're very much aimed at women and young girls, and tend to use this visual language to communicate ideology about, how you should think, how you should be, the way that you should live. And these to me were really fascinating because they seemed to be using this quite common at the time direct-to-consumer brand aesthetic that I would say was very common with brands like Glossier or Way. But rather than using that to advertise a product, they were really promoting a specific ideology, and this aspirational thinking around your mindset and the way that you lived your life. And so I was really drawn to these and I started collecting hundreds of examples of these. And then I started writing a JavaScript algorithm that essentially tries to mimic all of the aesthetics that are wrapped up in these types of graphics, but then um, is collaging together language. So what you get is this sort of collaged output that's algorithmic of what many of these graphics are saying in terms of tone, but the language, it's an algorithm that really mimics Mad Libs, where you are taking bits and pieces from sentences, and and placing those together. And so all of the language is actually drawn on true language that I found in these graphics, so I wasn't writing anything myself, and it's not generative in the sense of AI, machine learning generative. It's generative in the sense that there's a logic-based algorithm that I wrote that is doing the language collaging. So as you can see, these are generating in real time, and whenever I show this piece in a gallery setting, I usually like to show it, and this is how it's being shown currently at arebyte, with the code running live. So even I, as the artist, can't tell you exactly what you're going to see because I've essentially set up a set of parameters for the system, and then the code is running live and executing in real time and making decisions as to what specific output is generated. And what I found working with this was that I started making this piece feeling quite cynical, honestly, about these types of graphics that I was seeing online, about the way that ideology was communicated. The more that I generated, it became fascinating to me that a lot of them still I think about and find meaningful in my day-to-day life. And of course, this piece is titled Fake It Till You Make It. And the word fake and its opposite, real, come up a lot in my work. It's something that I'm very haunted by in relationship to the internet, this constant discussion around what is real online and what is fake. Questions of authenticity, who's achieving it, who's not. And this was really a central question around one of the pieces that I made right before making Fake It Till You Make It, which is called Glance Back. And Glance Back is a browser extension that once a day at random, when you open a new tab, takes a photo of you and asks you what you're thinking about. So that looks like this. And then once you write what you're thinking about, it logs that in its archive of photos, and you start to amass this collection of images of you looking at your computer, and whatever you happen to be thinking about in that moment. And so it's not a moment that would probably otherwise be documented for any reason. It's the opposite of spectacular. It's just you sitting at your computer. It's just me sitting at my computer, but that's how I am most of my day, to be honest. And so it became this way for me to capture these moments in the way that I'm usually spending my time. And Glance Back, it's a browser extension, so it's also publicly available for anybody to use. I can't see anyone's photos. Big disclaimer, it's all stored locally on your machine. But I do see when people post and tag me in the TikToks or Instagram posts that they share their images from. So Glance Back has become, in the way that I view it, kind of this networked performance of the software that I wrote running on people's machines all over the world, and it becoming meaningful to people because it's not really about me. It's really becomes about their lives. And so here's an arena channel I have of just a selection of glance back posts people have made. And yeah, now there's about 7 to 8,000 people who use it every day around the world. And when I started making it, like I said, I was really interested in here this idea of being real. That has really extended to this idea of being realistic, which is a word that shows up in the title of my piece, which was commissioned by the Whitney Museum in 2024. This piece is called A Realistic Day in My Life Living in New York City, and it was commissioned by their digital art curator, Christian Paul, for their internet art program called On the Hour, which is kind of a sequel to their internet art program Sunrise and Sunset, where they have a piece run everywhere on whitney.org, an internet art piece for 30 seconds. And so my piece was the first commission for On the Hour, which has the piece running exactly on the hour 24 times a day. So I really wanted to make a work that emphasized this kind of timekeeping nature and the site specificity of the program running on the Whitney site. And it also runs on the screens in the museum exactly on the hour. And so I started thinking about how you experience time throughout the day when you're online. And then I started really fixating on the day in my life videos that have been very popularized by TikTok and now Instagram Reels also, and specifically day in my life in New York City videos. And I started watching a lot of these and saw the way that people were using the word realistic in their videos to imply that the content that they were sharing was more realistic than maybe other day in my life videos. But of course, it's sort of nullified by this scenario because they're filming their life, which already is sort of like an unrealistic way to go about your day, to be constantly trying to like create the cinematic experience of your day-to-day life. So I started watching these really like, and it became like a treasure hunt where I was looking always, every time I watch a day in my life video, for a specific time of day. And the narrator of the video, the person who was posting, had to say that specific time of day out loud for me to include that excerpt of text in my work. So I'll play you. The piece ran from October 2024 to October 2025. So it's not running on the website anymore, but here is an example of what it looks like when it is running on the website. So um, this large pink text, which is very much the styling is very much a reference to TikTok. Is what you would see if you watch it at 3 p.m. One of the options for 3 p.m. At 3 p.m., I take a SoulCycle break, shower, and finally change into a real shirt. Then people comment, I claim this life in all your outfits. I love days like this in NYC. I'm obsessed with you. I live in NYC too, and I really need to start going more places like this. Always have loved you. Can I please be you? The contrast between city and corporate life. And so I've really designed this work to be experienced as a kind of call and response. See first what the person was saying, and then you see this mass of comments animate out that live sort of underneath the main text, and that's very much the way that in terms of the UX of TikTok, I really view the comments as living underneath the main video. And when I was watching all of these videos, I became really interested in not only what the person was saying, but then also the relationship between the mass of people commenting and the narrator, the kind of parasocial relationship that they develop, and then also the 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 kind of yeah, call and response nature that these videos have, and the way that they people commenting fantasize around New York City, especially. So there's also an Easter egg in the piece, which I'll show you briefly. Uh, Casually eating an ice cream sundae at 1 a.m., talking to my aunt. And so if you click on the text, it says, at the time that you're watching at 1 a.m., I clicked around the Whitney's website online at whitney.org, which is what you're likely doing. So this is not, this piece is not a video, it's live running JavaScript. And so there's between 3 and 15 different options for every single hour of the day. It was quite hard to find 3 a.m., 4 a.m. because people don't usually film those in their day in my life videos, what they're doing in the middle of the night. But there are some out there on TikTok. So this became a real act of collection, and then kind of using all of the media I excerpted like the text and everything as found digital material to make this new work. Um, and I usually describe my relationship to the internet as one of love/hate. This is also the title of this piece of mine from 2022, which features this found object, this pink punching bag, and has uh, a phone dropped into the pocket that's on the front of the punching bag that features um TikToks of mine that I filmed 2020 or 2021, around 2020, 2021. Um and it's a compilation of those. But I talk about my relationship to the internet of one of love/hate, and I like that paradox because it's really important for me in my work to be very clear about the ambiguity that's involved in my relationship to the cultures that I'm embedded in as my personal interest, but also as an artist. And I think people often want to read a neat narrative about an artist's relationship with the internet, a person's perspective around the internet. But I've said this before, but to me, it's impossible to have some sort of grandiose take on what the internet is because it's everything now. It's like air. It's like and it's very, I think our relationship to it, and specifically, I think a lot of times people talk about the internet now, what they're really talking about is social media. My relationship to that is very complicated. And I that's why I make work about it because it is complex. And it's important for me to be critical, but also indulgent and acknowledge the ways that I'm complicit in these systems, and finding ways of living and sharing that I genuinely enjoy within these systems too, even though I do have a critical perspective. And so all of that brings me up to my most recent work, which is the last work I'll talk about. And because I just wanted to talk about a few pieces today before Pita and I get into more of a conversation. But again, circling around this idea of reality, I most recently have been interested in the idea of reality in relation to generative AI. This word shows up a lot. And then also in relation to the reality television, which to me is this format that we all acknowledge and collectively agree is hyper twisted and produced, and it's not real in some way, but we like to still watch it with this suspension of disbelief and view it as real almost. And so recently I turned back to watching the American reality television series Dance Moms. For those who are not familiar, it is a reality show that premiered in 2011, and it follows a group of young competition dancers who are in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who go to dance competitions and compete. This is a show that I watched a lot when I was younger. I also grew up as a competition dancer in Pennsylvania, so it's all very close to home. And I started rewatching the show, obviously much later now in my life, and seeing I was very interested in the visual world that was communicated throughout the show, and then also the dialogue and the way that the dancers interact with each other, that the coach talks to the dancers. So I started capturing many screenshots of the show. You can see here in my Arena channel, I have almost 1,000 screenshots from rewatching the show. And like I do with many of the generative systems that I build, I kind of collected this as material and then wanted to restage this material through a generative method. And so I was using an AI generative video model as well as a text to video model as well as a text to music model to restage scenes from the reality show. And this diagram just very high level shows you part of the process that I use to restage every scene. I captured screenshots from the show, like I was just showing you. Then I created a shot list of all of the scenes that I wanted to restage. Then I would write very detailed, you could see it's like 3 paragraphs sometimes, text to video prompts for each shot. Then I would usually generate many videos, between 15 and 100 before finding the final single shot that would end up in the final work. And then I would generate and select a soundtrack with a text to music model that I would then pair with that scene. And all of this is edited together to create a final clip. And this is best illustrated by showing you the work, which I will just run for you now. The work is not a video, even though it's very video heavy. There's a custom piece of software that I wrote that essentially shuffles all 111 scenes that are in the piece, like songs on a playlist. So the work has no true beginning or end. It's all the clips, which are static, but the like songs on a playlist, which the clip is pre-made, but they are shuffled in an endlessly reshuffled order. So there's no point of loop. Okay, I'm just gonna play this.
Everyone's pretty, hiding in ugly truths. Deception is all around. Marina, Marina, Marina is on fire. Put your hands up in the air. Put your hands up in the air. If you're scared, then I'm always
Hey, don't panic.
All right, girls, this week we are going to Star Quest Dance Competition.
Well, I guess it's been a while since I have smiled, and I'm not crazy, well, maybe a little bit. Maybe it's hard to start with.
So maybe they've heard of you, maybe they haven't, but we're trying to tell them who the real you is. 1 and a 2, 3 and a 4, 5 and a 6, 7, 8.
Some things glitter, but they don't ever come for free.
Stretch your knee. Stretch your knee.
City of angels, but nobody wants to use their wings.
I'm really happy that I got first place. I mean, I haven't really won first in a while.
Baby.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it there. But even though there's no true order or duration of the work because everything is shuffled, the unique runtime of all of the clips that are included is about 15 minutes. So this is just a very short excerpt. And Star Quest, which is the title of the piece, is also the title of a performance lecture that I've had the chance to perform twice in New York now, and once in Los Angeles. And I'm hopefully going to bring to London this fall. So we'll keep you posted. But the performance lecture is me performing for the runtime's about 25 minutes, and I walked through my history growing up as a competition dancer and how that relates to the way that I view performance online. Because in competition dance, you're on stage, you're performing, then you're ranked and judged. And then also then how that relates to the way that I view this sort of optimization of the body and of the image and this kind of through this restaging process that I went through with generative video and music models. A documentation of the performance. The last performance is online at Roulette, which is the venue that I did it in May at. It's online on their website if you're interested in watching. And this piece was also the center of my most recent show this past spring at the Gallery Bitforms in New York. You can see here, this is where StarQuest lived, and in the gallery setting, and it was shown on this LED wall, and behind the wall there was a rack of dance costumes that were actual secondhand source dance costumes, and they brought some nice physical materiality to the experience of viewing the piece, and I like that I was able to create this kind of backstage behind the scenes area of the work with its physical installation in this way. And then these pieces here are wall works that feature a brushed aluminum panel and a phone on that panel. And each of the phones is playing a fan edit that is made of the piece of StarQuest. So they're kind of theoretical fan edits of the theoretical show. And I think Dance Moms, the original reality show, is very popular still because of the way that it's edited and recycled through TikTok and Instagram. And so this is kind of way to represent that existence of meta content, which is like content about the primary content, through things like fan edits on short form video platforms. Okay, well, I think that was a lot, and I really wanted for this to leave a lot of time for Pita and I to have a conversation and for questions to be asked. So I'm going to stop sharing there. Yeah.
Hi, Maya.
Hi.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I think it really leads into like this conversation and gives a lot of things for people like to think about, specifically in the context of fake it till you make it, but also the way that you work between the online and the physical, like recontextualizing like digital culture.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, it's always great to hear you speak about your work. I wanted to start maybe like the conversation going back to Fake It Till You Make It, which is the work that we're exhibiting at arebyte. And I'm thinking more about the piece within its original context, which was Instagram. And it would be great to hear like how did you encounter this content and what attracted to you into like working with it, and then how frequently did you see it online, and what was the response of the community that existed within the comment section as well on Instagram?
Yeah. I mean, when I started making this piece, um I think that work showcases this methodology that I've only realized in hindsight that I tend to use for a lot of pieces, which is kind of first going through this act of, I almost think of it as foraging or collection, where I'm collecting a lot of examples of a certain very specific type of media, and then like you cultivating those and then using those as a reference for the system that I'm making. And so I had a really I just had a really, I was naturally so drawn to these graphics when I started seeing them become very popular online. And I've always been really interested in the language of advertising, and the way that products and ideas are marketed, especially to young women and girls. And so that's something that I feel like I grew up experiencing through magazines or you know, television or film, and these to me kind of extended that lineage, especially of the language of magazines, where it's sort of there's sort of this like imposed ideology around the way that you should be that's framed as self-help or self-improvement. But I think actually or I've just always kind of felt very struggled with the way that this language sort of moves the needle as to like what you should aspire towards or the way that you should be living. So for all those reasons, I became really interested in these graphics to answer your question.
Yes.
And I also was interested, like, it was the combination of that, what I'm describing, and then also aesthetically, kind of the consistency of their aesthetic. I think it was a kind of you know it when you see it type of media, like type of media object that was very easy for me to start to identify. And I actually created a second Instagram account separate from my own Instagram account where I only followed accounts that posted these types of graphics. So the algorithm really quickly learned that I was only interested in this type of content and would only feed me that. Yeah, and so I think it's been surprising to me in retrospect both how already it feels like such an clear archive of a time that was before now. Like I don't like these graphics are no longer popular, Instagram's not square. But also for me it feels like it was sort of the first moment that this like method of making was unlocked for me, which I've only realized looking back at it now.
Yes, yeah, because that's something definitely like when you look into the color palette that leads you into like even like Tumblr or like MySpace or like a lot of like online media from the early 2000s, and then magazines like Cosmopolitan or Teen Vogue that have this like a very like girly palette in a way, and the way also the aesthetic becomes a medium that can be connected with like previous advertisement. And like if you think about films from the 50s 60s, that you have this violent pink that is also present on Ambie show, that it represents like a kind of like femininity that is like very framed by the patriarchy in a way through media as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think there's something about it that feels, like you're saying, inherently tied to the aesthetics of a platform like Tumblr, for example, or traceable to that. And I think aesthetically, people look at this. There is an Instagram account for the project, but mostly people are encountering it. If they come to a gallery, like it's just running, but it's very recognizable as aesthetically communicating that it's the type of image that would live on somewhere like Instagram. And I think that that the way that the output of the algorithm is able to communicate that so clearly is really fascinating to me. And also in the way that it sort of embodies something so core to the way that people generally perceive Instagram to operate aesthetically, where I think Instagram is very tied to the public's ideology around women and young girls. And I think that yeah, those two things are just inextricably tied within the project, but also like public consciousness around like who uses Instagram, who's the best at using Instagram, and what Instagram represented in the early
Yes, yay.
5 years ago. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think also in the context of like looking at how this yeah, like through like JavaScript, like this new language is emerging, that at some point we have naturalized or like really embedded in our way of thinking about the wellness culture online. Is interesting just when you bring it into the physical space, like with the way that is exhibited at arebyte. We have a lot of like tourists or like teenagers or people like they're not interesting in art, but then like coming to see this piece, like they do stop to see like, wait, what's happening here?
Yeah.
In a context when they have a lot of advertisement, and especially coming from Camden High Street. I
Yeah.
did think the language makes you like first you think it's like very natural, but then it does make you stop and like rethink what you're like reading in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm so interested in, artists who really work with pop and pop culture for that reason, where you're really drawing on um commercial commercial aesthetics essentially. But you're also in the context of the work, being rendered as art, you're asking the audience to kind of look at something that's so familiar. They've seen a million of images a day that look like this, but you're asking them to kind of look at it with a different perspective, a critical perspective, and that is exciting to me for any audience to experience.
Another thing that I also wanted to discuss, and then you already like briefly mentioned it to the presentation, but it's how through glance back and also a realistic day in my life in New York, you're reflecting on like how like the performativity of authenticity online has evolved since 2018 when you were like starting working with glance back to the 2024 where you were commissioned to develop this piece for the Whitney Museum. There has been like a big shift on how people even perform online. Like it's more like video based, and then it's more fan based as well. It will be great to hear you speak a little about how you have seen that evolution through the works, but also through the context where they are developed.
Yeah, it's funny looking at both of these pieces in retrospect, kind of as like nodes on this evolving timeline around people's relationship to presenting online. I remember feeling in 2018 when I first made Glance Back. I was much younger and I had grown up really, I'd always loved posting online, but I always felt like it was very clearly to me, like I also grew up as a dancer. It was like being on stage. Like there was no part of me that was like, oh, here's a place to really express my true self. I've always felt like, okay, you're uploading something on to an online platform, you're performing, like you're getting out there, you're putting on what you want people to see. And I was really unsettled by the kind of um the intensity of conversations around authenticity that were happening around 2018, where people were saying that, like authenticity is next to godliness, being real online is morally good. And if you seem like you're being fake online, that's morally bad. Because I felt everything online was, of course, a performance, but not morally bad. Like it was performative, but not not in a negative sense. And so Glance Back kind of grew out of this grappling with that in the way that I presented myself, but also in the way that, everyone is sort of dealing with their own methods for and struggling with their own methods for presentation around that time. And now, a realistic day in my life was made and released on the Whitney's website in 2024. I think there was kind of this new, I felt that there was this new acceptance with sort of the performance mode that being online requires. And I felt like there was sort of this people were less accusatory that what you were posting was not real, but people were instead just embracing what was online as real. And the word realistic plays a lot into that. I actually haven't tried to articulate these two pieces in relation before, but I think people have kind of settled in a lot more to the trials and tribulations of posting online and what that means and how effortful it really is to maintain the performance. But I think many people still want to go out and, be engaging with that level of performance. And so I think Realistic Day in My Life really takes into account this platform shift toward short form video. That, you know, I think video was mostly associated with YouTube, previous to TikTok in terms of like social media platforms or something like Vine, you know, but I think TikTok really changed the modes for presentation in a really dramatic way, where things get blurrier because video was more difficult to manipulate. New skills were gained in the process, like making day in my life videos. So yeah.
Just just hearing you speaking, like, yeah, it makes me think about Instagram. Maybe, yeah, like in 2016, 17, like people were trying to move a little bit away about that sense of staging
Yeah.
their lives. And then there was apps like Be Real, and obviously with like Glance Back, that it became like a viral tool that people were using to see themselves privately.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting to also chart, you know, of course, like Anne Hirsch, the artist, put out her project Scandalicious in the early days of YouTube, where she was performing as you know, a character, but she talks about it as, you know, essentially like an exaggeration of certain parts of herself. The character's name was Caroline. You know, she's putting that work out on YouTube in the early days of YouTube, and then, you know, there's Amalia Ullman's Excellences and Perfections, which I think is it's film-esque, but it's you experience the work as a series of static images. And I think it's always fascinating to see, like, even very specifically in art, you know, the early days of these platforms, how artists are responding to and kind of manipulating the way that they can like tell a story through a character and a narrative, but really using the media format endemic to that platform and what that platform is bringing that's new at the time that they're making it to. Yeah.
Because I even remember with Amalia Ullman's piece, like people didn't know if it was like she making a shift in her life, and it was like after the performance was finished that she let people know that it was a performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that sense of like questioning what's real and not real, and then I guess like with TikTok and the way like people are fully like taking over like a cinematographic approach in their lives and then presenting this performance, it doesn't question it, like you assume it's fake in a way, and that's acceptable and that's the norm.
Right. No, exactly. And I think there's especially with the day in my life videos, there's always this kind of dipping in and out of perspective from the audience where people want to, like reality television, I feel sometimes people want to perceive it as it being real, but then of course you have to remember like the entire apparatus around um the apparatus that allows it to be coming to you as content. Like you see them making a coffee, it's like they had to set up their phone at a certain angle to film making the coffee in this way. And so it's actually, you know, there's this entire ecosystem behind it, but you can choose what you want to see or believe, you know, as kind of this like yeah, non-performed element of it or real element of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that in a way becomes also formulaic, no? And that's where it's interesting that then algorithms interface to yeah, overexpose like how people are composing things based on other trends or other users, and how people are creating their own lives to create their own narrative of their persona online.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, I watched so many day in my life videos. Of course, I watched the ones that had hundreds of thousands of views and were super viral and popular. I also watched a lot that were really not popular at all because I was going very deep to try to source all of the text for this piece. And there was something even like so moving about watching the ones with less traction online because there's yeah, it's like this raw desire to share your life, which I think is an impulse that exists very much pre-internet, but yeah, honestly it was very, I think like the work often has a lot of humor, and work that's made about in relation to these certain trends on the internet are often seen as funny, which is funny, but I think there's also like yeah, and all of the work from artists I love who make work about the internet too, there's something really emotional about it, I find. That's how I felt making the piece too.
Yeah, and I was even wondering when you were doing the presentation about the content that you found for users that were uploading content at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., like what were the questions or like the type of activities that they were doing? Because I feel that's a time when you like maybe like are coming out from somewhere, or you have like a very intense day, or you're waking up in the middle of the night because it's something that is running through your mind. So I wonder like what type of content were you finding with those type of
Yeah,
users?
there was some it's funny where it would blur between when people were staying up really late versus getting up really early. There were some people that worked in the morning news or had jobs that they had to be up really, really early for like 3, 4 a.m. So I would get some content from that. There were sometimes people who went out quite late, or uh, it's funny, I'm sure, so myself included, I have many nights where I'm up really late, like just like clicking around on my computer. But what's the type of content that is most popular to share through day in my life? It tends to be pretty aspirational, I would say, or like so it was hard. During the weird times, people were usually doing something that was like social or obligatory, um,
Mm.
versus random other stuff. Even though I think all hours of the day people are doing random independent activity, but yeah, I mostly was able to find things where people were out late or up early for unusual jobs.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's yeah, like interesting to see how they clash like these two the very different people.
Yeah, yeah.
And I also want to discuss Star Quest, which yeah, like I really enjoy like viewing an abstract of it during the presentation. Uh, I would really like to like hear more about that personal experience and your own history as being part of like a dance and the competition, like scene when you were like younger, like a kid, like young teenager, and what do you feel like it meant for you, like what you have gained from it, and then what are the lessons that you observe of it as a cultural like phenomena from a personal
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah. This piece was really personal and psychologically strange for me to make. I think I'm not sure I could have made it any earlier. Like I mentioned, I grew up as a competition dancer and I did it all the way through, I think I started when I was like 10 or 11 and I did it all the way through high school. So I
Mm.
finished when I went to college and it was such a big part of my life, but a part of my life that I think I maybe not as clearly to me in the moment, but I kind of buried when I went to school. And I um revisiting it through this kind of process of making StarQuest was really strange because it allowed me to, I was dealing pretty directly with a lot of um the dancer psychology on the reality show. The cast that is on there and the way that they're treated is um like pretty abusive, I would say, like just really they're often treated with a lot of cruelty. They're really young. They're between the ages of 6 and 13, the original cast when the show first aired. And they have this degree of pressure put on them that is absurd, for of course the stakes, it's competition dance
Yeah.
and the age that they are. And I think, luckily, like I didn't have crazy parents or a crazy coach. Like the reality show, my
Yeah.
experience was not as intense as that, but I think just the way that being part of that system really encourages this you to kind of self-punish and push yourself to be optimized in a
Mm.
variety of vectors for the stage and to be a performer and to be satisfying an audience. To me, it has very clear parallels for performing gender in general, also for the culture of optimization, the kind of gamified culture that we live in. And so it became very relevant to me beyond, you know, the niche of competition dance, but extended to the way that I think about how I operate in the world, no longer as a dancer, but, you know, as an artist and as a person. And so making the piece, I was able to kind of think through a lot of the ways that I naturally cycle through talking to myself in my mind. And I think I mentioned this to you when you came by the studio recently, but it was so surprising to me when I started making the work. I realized that I didn't feel like one of the dancers in the piece, and I talk about this in the performance too, but I really felt like the coach character who was pushing the girls to perform and do better. And that character is sort of, because of that, manifested in my likeness in the work. And yeah, I think it's a work that I, you know, I am still understanding all the impulses that were at play for me making it. But I felt so compelled to make it at this point in my life. So yeah. And there's a lot of, you know, and then there's a generative AI element where it's none of what you're seeing in the actual piece is real or happening. And yeah, there's a lot going on.
No, I think it works really well as a metaphor for like to express how systems are imposing attributes to people, and specifically, yeah, with this community that you're exploring through the work of like young children, young women that are still like forming their identity and then having to respond to their parents, but to the stage, to an audience, and having to do that live. It really speaks of, yeah, like how many people are like interacting now as well with social media and some of the things that we have already highlighted in the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. I think it formally is very different from a lot of my other work. You know, in terms of the way that I made it and how um it looks somewhat live action, even though it's all generated. But I think, yeah, like you're saying, relates very closely to everything else we've been talking about in the other pieces. So yeah.
And I would also like to unpick a little bit more what you were like, yeah, like describing about the process when you become the coach mom with your yeah, like your models, with all your algorithm models, and then how you're like trying to generate images and tell them like, yeah, be faster, like move, move to the right, like be, yeah, like yeah, be better, you know, like how you're like really working like through the prompt to create the image making, and what that process does also when the algorithm is generated also to please what humans want to do. Like it will be a little bit like, well, it'd be great to hear more about that process, and then what happened in the moment when you were working with these models.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reason that I've always liked making generative systems in my work is because there's this element of chance. And you know, it's this process of writing prompts to produce you know, elements of the work is very in line to me with where most of my work, like Fake It to Make It, where I'm writing code to define a system that then produces the work, but then also feels very related to, you know, um, Fluxus artists and Soloist and artists who, you know, built their practice around the process of defining a series of guidelines for a work that would then, you know, where the artist's hand is not what is important, but the guidelines are really what determine what is the work. And then you know, was like the basis of conceptual art, like as Solowit would talk about it, the execution is like the least, not the important part of making the piece. And so yeah, to answer your question with like the feeling like the coach in the piece, I felt very much like I'm choreographing, I'm giving feedback, but I couldn't, and especially working with these generative AI models, maybe to a degree that's the highest of any other generative system, I felt like I had the least control, which was also very frustrating. the models I was working with were very new, and I there's a lot of mystery around how to prompt in a way to get what you want, even from the people who are, you know, the researchers who are the most in tune with making these models. And so there's kind of a level of comfort that I had to reach with ambiguity and sort of letting this process of giving up agency too. But it was kind of like a song and dance of, you know, artists I am and artists are, I think, very controlling about like what they want out of a piece. And so having to kind of give up, yeah, a degree of control while also trying to exert an extreme level of control on something that you are not able to hold so tightly. Um, all in all, the process of making the piece was very frustrating. And I think that to me relates to this idea of being a coach where like you can only do so much, you're not on stage. Like you're not the one executing the performance, and so you can do everything you can. And you know, with a certain level of intensity too, but then you have to give something up to the dancers that you're working with. Yeah, and so I think it just yeah, it just mirrored my practice back to me in an interesting way. Thinking about because the coach, you know, actually figures as a character in the work.
Yes.
That was really strange. And you know, a lot of the lines that the coach says echo the way that I talk to myself as a person and as an artist now about, you know, I think it's being an artist is a lot about performing and like trying to get things right when you're out there on whatever type of stage you're out there on. And so yeah, yeah, but all of that made feeling like the coach kind of accurate parallel.
Yeah, ultimate, I think, is like linked to this idea of like perfection in the
Yeah,
performance, and then in the way that then people can experience the performance of yourself, or like in this case of the dance and
yeah,
the
no,
choreography.
yeah. Yeah, and especially that's also something I was really interested in when you think about the reward functions that are built into a machine learning model. And when you train a neural network, you're optimizing to try to get it to perfection, which is like passing this level of realism essentially from what a model outputs, Turing test-esque, but it's also kind of unachievable by the model. And so, yeah, where that kind of moment of failure, which inevitably every dancer is failing at being perfect, and every output from the model is failing at being perfect, which is its goal, and directive. So yeah, that kind of desire for perfection, but ultimately always failing is also, yeah, I think core part of the piece.
My like one of my favorite parts is when you can actually see that these like very hyper realistic film like has like a character has 6 arms, or like it's turning in itself. Like I really like enjoy those like glitches in the film and these
Thank
moments where
you.
you can see the break it.
Yeah, it was important to me. I felt kind of panicked making the piece because I didn't want the model to get too good. Because I also I really like those moments where it's slightly off. I was worried the model would kind of, because you don't really have control over also like when the models change. And so I was worried it would just suddenly change and be really too perfect for me to feel like it was as interesting. So, yeah, I'm glad that those moments made it in the work too.
And there's another part of it that I want to talk to, but maybe like we can do it a little bit briefly because it's a little bit more off topic, but is the music, because
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's something that I quite enjoy. But at the beginning I thought there were actual lyrics, but then after a little bit you realize it is also like generated, like it's not actual music that is out there. So I would love to hear a little bit more about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, the music, I'm glad you asked about that. It's really interesting because, of course, usually when you choreograph a dance, when dancers learn to dance, they learn it to the music. But I was generating the videos and the music separately, and then I would edit them together. And so there was this kind of like lining up of the video and the music that I would do to try to make it look like, oh, like the dancer's arms go up on this count. Like I wanted to look like it's ostensibly a moment in the music where that would be choreographed to happen. So that was kind of a like funny reversal. And the music itself, all of the lyrics are actual lyrics that are pulled from Dance Moms. So they are lyrics of songs that they dance to in Dance Moms, but the song is different and remade through a model. So it's sort of again this like weird restaging of something that does exist but is being now twisted. And so, but generating the music was also very strange. It was very volatile. You can describe the energy and vibe of the song that you want, but you know, you can generate it many times and like the videos, it's different every single time. But for this piece, you know, I wanted music that sounded quite like canned and you know, not so bespoke, so having the generated music worked nicely, and I wanted everything to be kind of strangely synthetic in the work, which is also why I didn't want to use existing songs. So yeah, try to keep it short.
Yeah, I think it does really do the work, like the music, like and like complementing the work and the choreographies
Yeah,
and the whole world around
yeah, the
StarQuest.
songs, I know all the songs by heart now. They're a little second snippet, yeah.
And like maybe it's a good moment to speak about yeah, like the physicality of the works, because speaking about StarQuest, it made me thought about the outfits that you like bought secondhand and that you were displaying at Bitforms, and then how would like some of your recent work, but also like works like Love Hate, like you're bringing that digital and online culture into the physical space, and also sometimes you bring back the object into the online. So it will be like good to hear about that approach, and then how you're thinking about what makes sense in terms of the like translating the online into a physical space, like through the performance lecture, but also the installations and the sculptures. It will be, yeah, like great to hear more about it.
Yeah, I've been recently talking about showing digital work in physical space as an opportunity to add metadata to a work, because I think inherently a file-based work is usually often dimensions variable, or it doesn't have like a true physical size, um, or you know, display necessarily attached to the work. That's something that the artist decides, and the way that it's installed. It can manifest in a million different ways. And so I think the role of the artist in, you know, producing a physical installation around a digital piece is really to understand the way that you ideally want an audience to encounter this work. That's, you know, outside of, I think it's a privilege to be able to show work in a physical space and have an audience encounter it outside of their own browser on their laptop or phone. Um, and I very much believe that, you know, if you're viewing one of the websites I made on your browser, you're seeing the work in its truest form. But I think the work can manifest in different ways, and that's just the beauty of making digital work. And so, yeah, to answer your question, like with StarQuest, with my recent show at Bitforms, to me, I mean, StarQuest is the biggest piece in the show. But it could be, you know, you can show it on a phone, you can show it on an LED wall. And so I showed it on a larger LED wall and really wanted it to have a heavy presence in the space. And then I wanted the delta between screen sizes in the show to be very large. And so the only other screens in the show were the phones that were on the StarQuest Edit wall works. And, you know, those are, in comparison, super small. And so, yeah, I think because also I am so conceptually driven as an artist, and because my primary medium is, you know, software or software of some kind, I usually make decisions about the material that I feel are going to best like accentuate the digital piece too. So I use a lot of metal often, which has a kind of like hardware quality to me. The phones are mounted on brushed aluminum. And with um, Love Hate is such a specific kind of funny story where it's a found object, the punching bag, and I found it while I was looking for PB Teen furniture on Craigslist and encountered it without looking for it online, but then became obsessed with the object because it was it was a form that connotates violence, obviously, the punching bag, but it was already this like perfect pink color and had this pocket attached that was, you know, advertised for an image of someone or something you hate. So, yeah, and so each piece is different, but yeah, I really believe that it's important for digital work to kind of have that opportunity to manifest physically because I think it adds so much information to the work.
Yeah, and it's something that we were also discussing recently about this attention span that then you have in the space once the work is outside of like circulation. Also, sometimes people take for granted content that is online, but then the fact that they have to encounter it and actually pay attention to it, and they cannot swipe anyways,
Yeah, exactly.
brings something different to the way they approach the work.
Yeah, yeah, no, attention is a major part of the importance of digital work being presented in physical space, I think. And I think also for me has been something really exciting to start to play more with through developing the performance lecture and thinking about when you have an audience's attention, a seated audience's attention for a specific amount of time and how different that feels from um, people encountering work in a gallery in a more transient space. So, yeah.
I think on that note, maybe we can go back to the audience and I'll have a look at the questions that we have in the chat to see if we can like go through a couple of them.
Yeah.
Um there's this is more a comment, but it's Dev G. Hobbs says, thank you so much for a really enlightened look at your practice. A lot of your work engages digital cultures that typically get presented to consumers through app and phones. And then they're asking the question, how do you see the difference in framing in presenting works that deal with these through browser windows and extensions?
Oh, yeah. Wait, sorry, what was the question?
I guess they're trying to ask, like, how do you see the difference of framing these works in, again, like in objects, like we were speaking before, like whether it's like online object or like a physical object with something that is like browser based or like have the different layers of that in terms of the online material attached to it?
Yeah. Um, I think it's really challenging. I think it's something that's really specific about the way that a lot of the history and paradigms for sharing art, the way that those are set up are not easy to adapt to work that takes has such fluidity in terms of its form. So I used to feel really stressed about that when I was making work that, oh, I had to decide that you know, kind of a digital work of mine or something that's browser based, like a website, or something as complex as Glance Back, which is a browser extension that has all these people use it, whatever, I had to decide on its one true form. But I think ultimately, I've kind of evolved my perspective to accept that, you know, one work can have a real variety of manifestations that are like world building the work and additive, when it feels right, and that I don't have to constrain it so tightly, even though that maybe makes it easier for it to operate in a certain way, but there can be kind of like, you know, like with StarQuest, even that was a big experiment for me to try to think, okay, I have this like world I'm building with it, but it's going to manifest in many different mediums and forms and ways. Yeah, and so I think that has been a useful realization that I don't have to impose my own limitations on it as an artist, even though I kind of feel pulled to impose limitations by the way that art is usually disseminated. So yeah, I don't know if that's the question.
No, I think so. And then I think
Okay.
when you're translating between mediums, you're gonna have to let go of certain things.
Yeah.
And then the way that these objects are then presented in space, like really has an effect on how they're framed too.
Yeah.
Let me see. We have another. Yeah, this is a comment. Is Maricel Reinhardt. Your work revolves so much around feminine anomalies in digital culture, and it's incredible for me when I see it. It can relate to it immediately. I'll be so curious to see your lens on male-dominated online anomalies. And then this is again from Maricel Reinhardt, wondering if you have ever gotten curious about them. I feel that when I stumble upon spaces that aren't for my demographic, I found so many interesting anomalies, but I also get disturbed quite quickly.
It's a really good question. Yeah, no, I've definitely lightly engaged with some the male dominated spaces online, manosphere of
Yeah.
the platforms. Um, I have a work in collaboration with the artist Anne Hirsch, whose work I mentioned before. Her and I have collaborated over a series of projects. The first of which is called Ugly Bitches, which is about we trained a GAN on doll product images, and then created a series of images that ended up being an NFT collection and a performance lecture and these plushy dolls too. But it was really focused on, yeah, femininity and aspirational femininity online in relation to kind of like the girl boss archetype. Then we also have a sequel project called Little Darlings that is focused on masculinity, where we fine-tuned some models on action figures. So I'll just send a link.
Yeah, in the chat.
Send a link in the chat, I guess. Yeah, but it's something that, and I think that was the first project where I explicitly so much have dealt with thinking about like similar like types of content that are targeted toward men online. And I think what I realized making it, of course, of course it's very different aesthetically and has many differences, but I think there's also something about it that was surprisingly similar to me, where it's like a lot about optimization and desire to be better and look better, and perform in a more affirming way to this toward a gender extreme. And that was quite fascinating, like diving into the project, doing that, and sort of it just resonated with the themes that Anne and I have both been interested in for a long time, around aspiration and gender online. So yeah.
I'll share the link in
Yeah, you can share the link in
chat with everyone, so people can see it. Oh yeah, they're saying OMG, amazing. Let me, yeah, I'll just leave it in the chat, so people can go back to it. But yeah, it's like something that is not as much in popular conversation, I guess, like now with the manosphere and some of the effects that it's having on politics as well. Like people are like more like driven into analyzing what's happening there,
Yeah.
in a sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think that I think, women artists are often prompted to speak on femininity in a way that, and gender in a way that male artists are less often prompted to. And yeah, and so it's interesting to think about the ways that within the context of, art, the ways that work has circulated or been made or like discussed as overtly through that lens, especially in relation to the internet. But yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good note to, yeah, like finish the conversation. Thank you so much, Maya, for
Thank you. It was so fun. Really nice to talk, and thank you everybody out there if you're listening.
yeah, thank you so much
So
for
fun.
joining. And I also want to remind people that you can still come and visit Fake Until You Make It at arebyte Digital Center in London until the 2nd of August. The work is presented at 2 and 6 p.m. every day. And it's also running in parallel to Soft Body School Machine that also closes on 2nd of August, the exhibition by Ambie Drew. And yeah, just as advertisement to the conversation, yeah, you can follow all of the activities online, and we have the new program Reboot Recoding Realities that is focusing on social, ecological, and technological regeneration, launching at arebyte in September. So stay tuned on the website for all of the activities we have for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.